In the dusty deserts of Nevada, a burnt ecosystem crumbling and falling apart, yet somehow still teeming with life beneath the waves of sand. Home of thousands of desert tortoises. These tiny reptiles have been here since the dinosaurs ruled the face of the earth. They have adapted to the extreme heat of the summer and the freezing cold of the winter. However, in the recent years, their population have been declining drastically, and that's because they're adaptless to the greatest enemy of all.
It is disastrous to die of these unnatural circumstances. I think in order to keep the Mojave Desert tortoise in the landscape, you have to address the effects of roads and traffic. Yeah, for this project, where we visit different locations in the range of the Mojave Desert tortoise, we hope to learn first about the technical aspects of the installation of fences and culverts and other crossing structures to help them to get to the other side of the highway. But maybe more importantly, we hope to hear from stories from people who have both feet on the ground in the conservation work. There's been a funny scientific study, maybe even tragic, that shows that a small percentage of people are not nice to the animals and will on purpose drive over. And I find it shocking that these people are among us.
My name is Michael Vomstead. I'm the wildlife ecologist here at Joshua Tree National Park. Desert tortoise population in the park are doing horribly. The story here is 30-3. That's our kind of little elevator spiel on tortoise. We once had 30 tortoises per square kilometer in the park, kind of on average throughout different habitats. Now we're at 3.
In terms of mortalities that we'll have, it tends to always be the hatchling size or yearling first year size, so very small tortoises. It's happening, it's not a problem that we're seeing with tortoises that are large, noticeable sized tortoises. It is the smaller, the little, 50-cent piece, $half size baby tortoises that are coming out that look like a pebble size.
Desert tortoise mortality in Joshua Tree National Park has been really spotty. I mined the records for the past, I think it was 40 years from about 1980 on. And what we found was an average of about a tortoise a year that we found dead on the road. Now, we fully understand that there could be a lot more tortoises that do get killed, scavenged by a coyote, pulled off by something else, and we don't actually see it. But we did see a kind of a nice average of about 1 tortoise a year, which really wasn't a big concern until 2017 when we had 8 of them. Some young ones, juveniles, some older ones too.
What's happening with desert tortoise populations is the reproduction is being affected by the reduction in the quality of the vegetation. The juveniles who do make it out of the eggs are being affected by things like ravens, and then the adults are being hammered by poor vegetation, by roadkills, by being run over by off-road vehicles, etc. And so you end up with fewer female tortoises around. So there are fewer tortoises laying the eggs. Those few eggs that hatch result in juveniles, many of whom could be killed by ravens, and then you have just far fewer tortoises being recruited into the reproductive population.
Roads and traffic have many different types of effects on wildlife. One of the most obvious things we notice if we find dead animals on the road, including desert tortoises. The main thing we do to keep the mortality down, to keep the animals from dying on the road, is to install fences. The fences keep the animals off the highway.
We found tortoise barrier fences to be very effective at reducing mortality. There was in a study that we conducted in this area, there were approximately 90% fewer dead tortoises that we found along the fenced section of highway compared to two very similar unfenced sections of the same highway. So it seemed to have a great effect.
We're looking at a desert tortoise fence. It's fairly typical. It is 2 feet tall, and it is a mesh size of 2 inches tall, 1 inch wide, and it keeps most of the tortoise age classes out of the road corridor. By keeping them out of the road corridor, we keep them from getting killed. So that's the primary function of this fence. It also has these smooth wires, no barbs, and that is basically to delineate right-of-way, but also to keep livestock also away from the road and on private land or on public land sometimes. And the advantage of smooth wires, especially on the top, is that it is less likely to result in injury and fatality of deer, elk, and other species with hoofs. They don't get entangled as much in these fences.
Well, one of the issues we have with fencing is, first of all, making sure that whoever owns that land or manages that land is willing to put up a fence and willing to maintain that fence long term. And so that's one of the most significant challenges is finding the funding, getting support to putting the fence, and then having the long-term maintenance solution for it.
I am Mahmoud Sadeghi. I'm a senior biologist working for the California Department of Transportation. We are required to place desert tortoise fencing either on our existing right-of-way fence or just a new fence for various locations throughout the stretches of the projects. The challenges is that a lot of times these fences require maintenance work that it's difficult because sediment buildup creates an issue. Sometimes the fence could get erosion control, could cause problem, or as we saw in the a lot of the culverts that created accessibility, there is tumbleweeds causing blockage throughout the culverts.
So we have a road that's called Cottonwood Road, and it's an area that goes right through the middle of our reserve. It's been fenced on each side. There's currently no tortoise connectivity at all on this road. And so over the past several months, or maybe even years, we've discussed the potential of retrofitting tortoise culverts under this road.
So this is Cottonwood Springs Road here in Red Cliffs Reserve, and it has a great example of fencing that's well installed. And this keeps tortoises from getting on the road and getting killed. But the fencing should also lead tortoises to areas where they can cross the road, such as culverts. However, here in the reserve and along this road, there are no culverts to get to, so the tortoise populations on either side of this road are permanently subdivided. There is no connectivity.
The second thing we focus on is connectivity, the ability for animals to move from one side of the road to the other side of the road. When you get larger and less fragmented populations, they have more persistence in the landscape.
Also fragments their populations. The smaller a population is, the more susceptible that population is to mortality from random factors or from catastrophes that might occur within that small area. So putting fences along roads increases that problem. So now we recommend culverts.
This is a corrugated metal culvert. It's installed in an area where we also have some water flow. But in many cases, the uses can be combined, both for water and for tortoises. Most important reason why we want these culverts here is because they provide connectivity. Because the fences alone would result in an isolated population on one side of the road, isolated from another population on the other side of the road. We need these animals to move. If we have that movement, we have one larger connected population.
Well, another problem with culverts that are put in place because of washes and small washlets is that the water passing under the culvert often makes that culvert non-passable by tortoises and other animals. If it's an area where quite a bit of water can pass through, the common thing for the highway maintenance companies to do, or highway maintenance organizations to do, is put either riprap or large boulders to absorb the energy of water passing through. And that renders a culvert completely unusable by tortoises because they'll just get lost and drop down into the ditches, the little canyons between big boulders.
So anytime we get significant rain, you're going to see some damage in some of the culverts, or the necessity to go in and maintain and clean those culverts out from debris. Even with the number of invasives that we have, like the tumbleweeds in particular, they'll completely clog up our culverts, and we need to remove those tumbleweed clusters as well.
So one of the remedies we have for addressing riprap that has large gaps where a tortoise could become trapped is to fill it in with smaller substrate like pebbles, local native soil, and that sort of thing. And filling it in eliminates most of those gaps and minimizes the potential for this to be a death trap for tortoises of all different sizes.
We're at the Ivanpah Desert Tortoise Research Facility just south of Nipton, California. They have a lot of predators that are after them, things such as ravens, coyotes, and other sorts of predators. This facility has pens that are hard-sided, as well as protective netting on the top to prevent predation while they're growing.
Another threat that we do face, though, that's an increasing threat, is the threat of predation from ravens, which are a subsidized predator. We've seen a real significant rise in the number of ravens in this area and the number of tortoises that are being predated by ravens.
We should also look at the raven management, as you've seen today and other times. Ravens are widespread throughout the Mojave Desert, and that is a huge problem that they basically prey upon mainly juvenile tortoises or hatchling tortoises, and that is something that we need to better make sure that if some of the funding should be directed towards that type of area.
A nice thing about studying raven predation on tortoises, unlike so many other predation systems, is that ravens leave a mark on the tortoise, and this tortoise stays there for months or years after they've been depredated. So we're able to find evidence of the predation years after, or at least months after the event has happened. This is what typically happens when a raven preys on a juvenile tortoise. The bony shell is very thin and it's easy to peck into. So they'll peck a hole into either the top or the bottom part of the tortoise, and then pull out the meat, or they might just pull the legs and the head out. This is a 3D printed model of a juvenile tortoise. Looks a lot like a juvenile tortoise. We can make lots of these, put them where we want, and then we combine them with a camera, and that camera runs 24 hours a day. It runs on infrared so we can see what happens at night. And the idea is that we can capture on video and in still any time that a raven, and here's the only raven I have in hand, but anytime a raven comes up and it pecks at the shell, we would record that and get some idea of how many ravens are causing predation.
A lot of the travelers use their food and trash in this region, and basically the ravens are attracted to eat just about anything they find. So they are spread around here. We have seen ravens building their nests all over the places, and underneath their nest there is a lot of carcasses of hatchling or juvenile tortoises.
While our practice is directed at reducing road mortality, providing connectivity, it doesn't mean that if we address those effects that we've done everything. There's a whole suite of effects that remain and that we should be addressing. And not only through mitigation, not only through reducing impacts, we have to first start thinking about how can we avoid the impacts, or at least avoid the most severe impacts. For example, by rerouting an existing road from the most sensitive locations. Do we need the road to be here? Can the road be elsewhere? Do we need a road at all here? Right? That is avoidance. Mitigation is about reducing the impacts once a road is already there. And the third step is compensation. If you can't avoid the impacts, you can't reduce the impacts, can you maybe restore habitat at another location further away from a road?
This facility is important because it is used to head start desert tortoises at a very young age. They're hoping to give the young tortoises a little bit of a head start so they grow faster and become more durable, faster than their counterparts on the outside of this facility.
When we kill tortoises on roads, we kill them in large numbers, large enough for the population in areas adjacent to roads to be substantially depressed. We have fewer tortoises living in areas close to highways, up to a few hundred yards. When we build fences, we stop that mortality. When we build crossing structures, underpasses, and in some cases overpasses, we also provide for connectivity. But based on modeling, when we look into the future as to how the population recovers by reducing that mortality on the road, by providing that connectivity, it's just not good enough. It takes hundreds of years, and even after hundreds of years, you're still remaining at a very low level. So it seems that tortoises cannot recover quickly if we just reduce the road mortality and if we provide safe passages. And that is where the population augmentation comes in. Bring tortoises that are bred in captive facilities or other sources, bring them to areas and artificially increase the population, give them a boost. Now again, based on modeling, that shows that we are getting on a trajectory to having more tortoises live close to roads. So that gets to your recovery goals on a shorter timescale, not hundreds of years, but perhaps a lot shorter.
We're hoping to get them to a little bit larger size so they're less able to be depredated and give them a higher outcome towards adulthood and to give a chance to lay eggs.
Over the last few years, we've been consistently developing more and more as the visitation of the park goes up. We've been trying to counter that with increased signage, gate attendants providing messaging to every vehicle that comes in. So getting out the message about tortoises, any sightings that we've had on the road, and just reminding folks to keep the speed to 25. We try to get that message across to every single vehicle to keep the speed slow enough to where they could react if seeing a tortoise in the road.
If you visit Joshua Tree National Park and you go through the topside area, which is where everybody goes to do their rock climbing and other things like that, you'll see these cutouts out of the curb as you're driving along. Those cutouts are meant for the tortoises to be able to get from one side of the road to the other and not have that curb act as a block or a barrier for them to get across. We give out free stickers to remind people that tortoises can be on the roads or tortoises can go under your car when you're parked. And we give those out freely in the spring and fall when the tortoises are moving. We have most of our visitation. Desert tortoises get hit on our roads. And it's a big problem in Joshua Tree National Park, the one that we're trying to address. One of those things is our signs. These are signs to keep people aware that when they're driving in Joshua Tree National Park on these roads, to watch out for those rock-shaped things that actually might be tortoise. The sign actually holds different things, like it might be icy, it might be flooded, the road, and it's really a testament to the environment that the tortoise lives in.
The past 30 years I've been working with tortoises, I haven't seen increases in tortoise populations because they're already in that vortex. Just spiraling down towards extinction, and we just need drastic measures, many different types of drastic measures in order to reverse those declines.
What happens in 50 years of a novel threat such as a road, the population absolutely crashes and plummets to right around 18 to 20% loss in just simply 50 years of roads. That is completely not sustainable by desert tortoises because they rely again so much on that adult continually reproducing.
There's different levels of engagement to help with the impacts of roads and traffic on the natural environment. Actually, our general impact on the environment, individual behavior and changes in behavior is what is needed. If you think about what you can specifically do for the Mojave Desert tortoise, is be supportive of measures that government agencies take to protect the species. Be considerate and not only think about your own safety and large mammals when you travel the road, also say, yes, it is good to spend money to keep us, when we drive these roads, from hitting and killing turtles and tortoises. Once we have killed them, there's very little we can do other than be sorry about it, right?